This is Kingdom Warrior. I'm your host, Andrea Beem, and every episode we bring you powerful conversations with bold business owners, passionate young adults, and overcomers who have turned their toughest battles into breakthrough moments. We dive into practical business strategies, leadership insights, and the mindset that fuels resilience, so that you can overcome obstacles and scale your calling with confidence. If this speaks to you, hit subscribe now on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode, and share it with someone who needs a shot of bold faith and courage today. Welcome to the Kingdom Warrior podcast. Today, I have such an exciting guest with me, Cari Briner from Idaho, who I have known for many years, and we've reconnected for this podcast. Before we jump in to Cari's story and our conversation, I just want to give a quick shout out to our local Christian bookstore, Willamette Valley Christian Supply. If you guys need any books or gifts or cards or Bibles, make sure that you visit them. Unfortunately, Christian bookstores, I think, are kind of a dying breed, the brick and mortar locations. So make sure to support them. And you guys, Cari Briner, this is our guest today, 25 years in the real estate industry. Of course, this is how we originally met. An entrepreneur, though, since she was 23 years old. So she's got lots of good stuff underneath her belt she's going to share with us today. And $1 billion in real estate sales. You guys, her organization is 390 people and growing like crazy. Cari, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I love this. I am so honored to have you as a guest. I'm really excited for our conversation today. I want to start with talking to you a little bit about your history. Something that you mentioned when we talked earlier was you said you're an entrepreneur since 23 years old. You've got 25 years in the real estate industry. But one thing you mentioned was that a large portion of that was not with God at the center. So let's start there. At what point did your walk with God start in your business journey, and what was it like prior to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always have believed in God. I grew up Catholic. I went to church every Sunday. I did not have a relationship with Jesus. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know I had access to that. I said my prayers. I believed that, that he was watching over me and I could pray for things that I needed to some degree. But if any of you have grown up Catholic, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. And I didn't really have that connection, right? So I had a belief, but I didn't have a connection. Therefore, I would have no idea that, I could ask Jesus for things in my business, my life, my anything. I didn't know that that was a thing. I usually just kind of went to prayer when I was having a challenge. It's just kind of what we did. So I say that because there's a lot of people out there that may go, oh, well, I believe in God. I did too. And that isn't exactly what I'm talking about. Where the transformation for me, I think, came in is when I realized for so many years I was shouldering all of my personal and professional challenges on my own. And I wasn't doing a really great job at that because we can only do so much on our own. And that's why we need Jesus. And I truly believe that. I didn't know that back then, that I could really get guidance from him. I could really pray for signs. I could talk to him. I could really leave it up to him and obey, and that he could guide my path. Instead, I was trying to be in control and figure everything out and fail forward and beat myself up about it and feel pretty hopeless because there was no one else that was going to help me. That was just whatever I could do. And that was it have to be good enough. And, nobody has a life without challenges, right? So I was a young mom, a young wife, and a young entrepreneur all at the age of 23. And I wasn't doing any of those very great. Because I was young, I didn't have a lot of life experience. And all of those things together created quite a bit of chaos. I also had one son who was diagnosed with some anxiety and OCD at a very young age. So that was very tumultuous. And I was really trying to manage that. And I didn't have a very healthy marriage, which became more unhealthy over the years. So I went to work to escape the challenges of life. I became kind of a workaholic. I was a really great real estate agent. I made a lot of money. I spent it all because I was miserable and I had nothing to show for it. And at one point, I finally decided that it was time for me to, make some changes. And that was just the beginning of my transformation. And it was taking control of my own health, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And just realizing that there had to be a different life for me and for my children because, I wasn't being the best person for them either. So that was about 10 years ago. And I would say probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I really have made a conscious effort to bring Jesus to the center of everything, including becoming the CEO of my business. And that has led to a lot of decisions in my business and in my life and moving across country away from my family, because I believe God led us here through my son. Well, first through my new husband and then my son. I also, we opened a co-working space in a time when real estate was kind of shaky because we had all the changes with the buyer rep and people were like, what's going to go on? And buyers agents aren't making money anymore. And right in the middle of all the chaos and the shifting of the market and interest rates increasing, the Lord tells us to take on, 1,000 square foot building with this astronomical lease. And we're like, what? And we had never even thought of the business model. We did not have a business plan. Very out of character for my husband. And yet we both heard the exact same thing. We saw the exact same vision and knew we were supposed to do it. There was absolutely no other explanation because we never see the exact same thing. Typically we have to come together and compromise, and we're very complementary to each other. So there's been and then moving to EXP and when our market was not attuned to it, and just all of the things that we had to be obedient. We felt we needed to be obedient to, even though we were nervous, even though it didn't make sense, even though other people thought we looked crazy. I mean, that's what it means to truly make God the CEO of your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's different. For many years, I would trust him with certain things, but I wasn't trusting him with all the things. And that you're not going to have the same relationship and you're not going to have the same results in your life if you're just kind of doing it. And so, of course, I had to take that step 10 years ago to really take control of my life and realize that God had to be at the center, and I needed to figure out those important parts of my life to make the life of my kids better and future generations and whatnot. But I also then have taken it to the next level. And so it started with my business, the last link and the one that's been hardest for me to let go of, because I do like to be in control. And I do have a lot of anxiety, and I do want to feel like I have control over things when I'm nervous about them instead of just letting it go to God, have been my children. And that has a lot to do with like past traumas, I think, and things of that nature through my marriage and whatnot. The long and the short is this year, and this last year, that was the last of the areas of my life that I no longer could have any control of. God had to take control of all of it. It brought me to the point in my life, the lowest point in the sense of understanding I have no control. I have to leave it in God's hands. And so business was easier, much easier than my children, but still hard. And, just like some people really have a hard time, with their finances when it comes to letting it go and obeying and giving it away when they don't have much. And, Chris and I have been able to work through those things over the years and really obey those calls. But I had a hard time, and I prayed a lot about it, really, really understanding that my children are God's children first. He loves them more than I even could. And at the end of the day, I have to lay it all down at his feet if I'm going to let him take control and do what he means to do, not only in my life, but in my children's life and for our purpose. And so, when you start to really, really, really dig in and pray about those things and ask for those things, he is going to test you. He's going to bring things that you can't even imagine, but it's going to bring you to a place in that relationship that changes everything. And so over the last 10 years, starting with just relationships and then finances and business and my children, there's just been a progression of that. And what's really interesting, Andrea, and then I'll stop, is when people think about that, they think like, oh, that's amazing. Like, you're doing this and then you're getting into this deeper relationship with Jesus. But what people don't really realize is the trials that come from when you ask for those things, because those things don't come easy. They come with trials. They come with tests. That's why, the testimony comes from the tests. And so being prepared to truly go through the trials, and then that's when you have to lean into your faith. And that's when that really does become deeper. You will find greater purpose and joy and peace and opportunity on the other side of that. But when you're going through it, you don't always see it. But it's in those moments that growth actually happens and that trust can be formed. And I believe that's when God really reaches you. So when people look from the inside out, they're probably like, holy cow, Cari's been through a lot. I have. I'm also
And we
I'm
haven't even
also
touched on all of it yet.
yeah, but I mean, even through the years, it's like, oh, she's a Christian, she should have an easier life. That's not necessarily true. That's not what Jesus said. I wish.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So let's go back to your timeline here because would you say that it was about 10 years ago you said that you really started incorporating God more into everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
At what point did you start getting more bold about your faith? Because I think when I originally met you, which was many, many years ago, I don't remember you being as bold about your faith. And I know in the last 2 years, at least for sure, probably
Mhm.
more, you've really gotten vocal about it, right? On your social media, through everything that you've gone through. And we're going to talk about your son in just a second, but you've gotten way more vocal about it. What caused you to make that decision? Was it something very specific that made that,
Yeah.
or was it a gradual thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When you first met me, no, I didn't talk about Jesus at all. I grew up in not only, I think, a geographical area in the United States that is very private, but also in a religion that was not bold. And I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. So I didn't really have much to talk about, right? I mean, like, sure, people knew I went to church and I believed in Jesus, but I wasn't talking about it with anybody. And so that wasn't a thing. And so 10 years ago, approximately, give or take, but close to 10 years ago, I met my now husband. And it was fairly soon after my divorce. And I did not want to meet anybody. I was like traumatized and I was just trying to get my life together. And it's interesting because, it's not our timing, right? And I probably wouldn't have obeyed that call had my now husband not been more persistent about it because he knew. And we had both been through a divorce fairly recently, long marriages from when we were young, very similar, two children, older. Mine was the youngest. My youngest was the youngest. We lived across country from each other and it didn't make any sense to me, but I was also not open. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus yet. I was just starting to figure out this transformation, like figuring out how can I get back into a better like what can I do? I need to go to church more. In fact, that's what I was thinking. I just need to go to church more because that's what I was accustomed to. Not I need to read the
Yeah.
Bible or I need to talk to Jesus. I didn't know about
Yeah.
all that
Just check
stuff
more
yet.
boxes.
Yeah, I just needed to do something.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to volunteer at church more. I don't know. I need to do something. And I was, getting healthier. I was working on just my confidence. I was working on just figuring out how to be a single mom and do all the things. And I had changed careers a little bit in real estate. I stopped selling and I started to lead an office. And I needed that. I needed that stability going into single parenthood. And I also needed I wanted to have more time to be able to do the extracurricular activities with the kids because I didn't have another spouse that was going to be as active and things like that. So I was going through this whole transformation and it just wasn't good timing to meet somebody. I mean, honestly. So I was like, whoa, this is not happening. But the long and the short was it was very clear to him it was happening. Today, in hindsight, it was absolutely a gift from God. No doubt, 1000% a reason. And I'm very grateful that he was persistent, that he did hear from Jesus. And he was the one who actually brought me into more of a non denominational Christian, church and kind of opened my eyes to getting in the word, reading the Bible, hearing from God, learning that he has messages for us, worshiping. Like none of these things I understood or knew about, but I was immediately very clear that this is what I needed in my life. So that was the first blessing. And then, and that was, 10 years ago or 9 years ago, I suppose by then. And so then it took me a few years just to kind of get my bearings and all of this. Right. And then I started realizing I had been hearing from Jesus a long time in my life. I just chalked them up to coincidences. The interesting thing about me, though, is I would always act on many of those things, even though I didn't really know why I was. I mean, I just felt like there was a reason, like, oh, if this person reached out to me, I need to do something about that. There's probably a reason. But I was thinking of it more like, oh, man, this is how the universe works. Like, this is cool. So, long of the short is I realize now that even though I didn't know what I was doing, God was still using me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he knew I didn't know what I was doing, but I was being obedient and that's all he needed. And so there's been a lot of those moments in my life that I can look back on now, and I'm super grateful for them. And I'm just grateful. I don't know why I did it, but I did. And so as I started to realize that I was hearing things from God and what these things really were, and getting into the Word more, and just starting to just feel like I was really gaining this relationship. There was some clear directives, and one of them actually came through my youngest son, who during COVID came to Chris and I and said he wanted to move to Idaho to go to high school, which is very, very out of his behavior.
Yeah. Wow.
He would not be a risk taker. He would not want to do that normally. And he wasn't a kid that was like very persistent. Like if you'd say like, "Ah, I don't think that's a good idea," he'd kind of just like let it go and just, okay, I'll do something else. And he was like over the top extreme about, I have to do this. And to the point that not only were we like, okay, let's see if we can figure this out, but his dad, who is still in Minnesota, was like, I'm not standing in the way of this. I don't know what this is, but it's not going to be me that tells him he can't do it, because he obviously really wants to do this. So when everybody hears about my story, the interesting thing about that is there's a lot of things that have added up to us being here in Idaho that I think have been extremely important to how the outcome of what happened to him this last year. So, again, he didn't know, but I really believe he was being really directed by the Lord. And to be honest with you, if the Lord would have told me to move to Idaho, I would not have listened, because I would not have asked my son to move to Idaho when he was in ninth grade. That would have never been a thing. I
Yeah.
would not have moved away from my family, because Minnesotans don't do that. I just would not have done it. I wouldn't have even told somebody I thought of it. It just would not have been a thing. So the Lord knows what to do, because if my son feels that strongly, he knows that I will listen. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what happened. We moved, and Carson's life changed after the move. It was very, very abundant that he made the right choice. We needed to do this, and his life was better in school, better friends, all the things. So we felt very at peace that we made the right choice. My older son eventually followed. All four of our kids were here. First time as a blended family that we were able to be together, because our kids were older. That was a blessing in and of itself. But being in North Idaho specifically transformed me, which I believe equipped me to be able to go through this last year. And I also believe that the people that like literally were put in our life over the last 3.5, 4 years since we've really been integrated in this community were instrumental in the prayers that led to my son still being here with us today at the level that he is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
God had a very, very specific weaved in plan that we had no idea about. And in my life, it started 10 years ago. So when I became vocal, it was probably more so about 4.5 years ago when I started with EXP, actually, because I had a very clear directive at that time that I was supposed to change what I was doing. And the impetus for what that was, in the organization I was with at that time, and my business partner, I was not free to talk about my faith um, in the way I wanted to, because I was in partnership, and there's got to be respect there, and there's nothing wrong with that. Uh, but it was very clear that the Lord was telling me, but Cari, it's now your time to go do your thing and do what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to lead more people to Jesus, because you have that ability and you have that influence. And all of these years of your influence has been focused on this. And you can also now start to transform that into this. And that is what you're supposed to do. And it was very clear to me. And so I just started being more bold once I had the chance to be, doing my own thing. And EXP's platform was the thing that allowed me to do it.
Yeah. So let's kind of delve into, we've kind of alluded to it a little bit. The last year of your life has been probably one of the most challenging of your entire life. And I have watched your story, prayed over your story many, many times as a mom of two boys. It was definitely hit me so hard watching what you were going through. So let's talk a little bit about what happened with your son in those preceding days, weeks, months.
Yeah.
After that.
So my youngest son, the one who brought us to North Idaho, and I'll say one of the reasons I think that we felt called to come to North Idaho was because of the community here, because we did get so involved with other faith-driven humans that allowed us to do things in our community, that allowed Chris and I to get into deeper relationship with Jesus, that allowed me to have prayer warriors around me that there's just so much that I could go into. But in 3.5 years, the way that God moved in our life through relationships it was like a whirlwind. It was actually, I didn't even really understand it. I was like, is this what happens to everybody when they move to North Idaho? I didn't get it. But I mean, he was preparing us clearly, right? He was preparing us because we needed that strength during this last year. But one of the other reasons I really believe that, Carson felt the need to move too, and what really helped my youngest son was that my husband and his stepfather, he has been able to just have a relationship with him that has been so strong and was building while we were here, because I think it was difficult for him to build it in Minnesota because his dad was there and he has a relationship with his dad. But the relationship he has with his dad is just different.
Yeah.
And what he needed is he needed a godly driven man.
Yeah.
And my youngest son really, really needed that because he had some struggles. And so, being a mom of two boys and a stepmom of two boys, like I get boys. And the youngest one, sometimes is the more rebellious one. And this is what happens. And he was
Yes.
youngest by 4 years. And so,
Yep.
I was so grateful to have Chris to be able to pour into him in more of a mentorship way from a man's perspective, but also to see Chris with such a strong relationship with Jesus, because I knew Carson needed that
Mm-hmm.
and Carson didn't have that. And I can only do so much as a mom because dads or father figures,
Yep.
they really matter, right?
Yep.
And so that was something that now when I look back, I know that was part of it, but it wasn't a perfect relationship. He's still a stepdad. Carson still wanted to be rebellious. Carson still had walls up and barriers, challenges. And, we just all do our best as a parent. And my number one line of defense was prayer. And so for the last 3 years, I had been praying very, very strategically for both my boys because there are some generational curses, and
Sure.
it's very clear. It's clear as day. I perpetuated some of those through the years, I believe. As a young mom, I didn't know any better. I mean, if I'd have been praying back then, God knows what would have happened, but that wasn't my path. That wasn't the path for any of us because God knows it and he'll turn it out for good. So it is what it is today for a reason. And I truly have peace with that. But I had been realizing as I grew in my faith that there truly are these things that we have to break these chains. And that even if my children weren't in a place where they could see it or believed it or wanted to break them, I'm a mom and I have authority and God is listening to me and I can.
Amen.
And my faith can move mountains if So for the last 3 years, I have been diligently praying about that and for that. And it's slow and God doesn't answer right away. And it doesn't just, I'm praying so everything's perfect in my family, and that isn't the case. And there had been some troubles and trialations, and ups and downs with Carson. But he has the biggest heart, always has. But I just knew, I just needed to keep praying for him. And I had not too long ago, I believe I really, truly, finally just got to the end of my rope as a mom saying, I can't figure this out. I can't solve these problems. I don't know what to do. You have to do something. And I'm going to be very vulnerable here because people will probably think I'm crazy. But this accident that my son had was God taking the wheel, and it was extreme, but I think it had to happen. So I prayed for it. And so I am grateful for it, even though it's been a tough road. So Carson got in a really bad car accident on January 24th. Actually, this is amazing. This podcast is happening the day before the year anniversary, probably not coincidentally. So I'm a little emotional this week because Carson had us put together a video. So if you're not friends with me on Facebook, go on Facebook and check out his video because what he's overcome has been really inspiring for everybody around him, but especially for Chris and I.
Yeah.
Just watching him go through that has inspired us along the way. I mean, there's no problems that any of us can have that we can't overcome if we have, a faith in Jesus. And that is really what has come from all of this and the hugest blessing. So Carson should have absolutely died in that car accident. There is absolutely zero reason he's alive. He flew 70 feet from a vehicle, but thankfully he flew out of the vehicle because the vehicle burned to the ground within minutes of the rollover. So he would have died had he had a seatbelt on. So the reality is that God was in all these little moments, but Carson went to a place where he was one step above brain dead with very, very small chance of living. And if he living any sort of independent life, they were talking to us about long-term care facilities. All of these things were a true reality. And I had a belief, I had a knowing. And although I was distraught and obviously traumatized, as any mom would be, I also had a very strange, peaceful feeling at the same time that if God saved him, because the enemy tried to kill him, and there's no doubt because Carson was going down a really rough road that month that this accident happened, that if God did not allow the enemy to take my son, there was a reason. And there was a purpose. And I was praying for the chains to be broken. And this could be the thing that broke the chains, not just for Carson, but for his brother, for future generations, and maybe for a whole bunch of other people we don't even know. And I truly had a sense of that. And I didn't really speak it out loud too much because people would think I was crazy. And yet I had a lot of people say to me, there's something about you. I know that you're struggling, but like, you're also like, I would be losing my mind. I would be like, how are you going through this? Because the hardest part about a brain injury like that and having someone in a coma is nobody has an answer. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
He's not awake, but he's alive. But
Yeah.
is he alive? And is he going to speak again? And is he going to do anything? And there is this uncertainty that there is no way that you have any sort of peace through that amount of uncertainty unless you have something else you're drawing peace from.
Remember you doing videos during that time and thinking that exact same thing because you would do videos and you would talk about updates about Carson. And I was always in awe of how peaceful you came across in the videos when I knew all hell was breaking loose behind the scenes. And it was powerful and inspiring to see. I knew what was absolutely knew what was behind that. So it's interesting to hear you talk about it now in
Yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah, because I mean, it wasn't me. I take zero credit for that because that is not, by the way, that is not my normal behavior. I'm a very poor reactor in traumatic events. Like, you can ask my husband, like, little small, like, things happen and I like freak out. I'm not calm. Like, really, I'm really dramatic and I get really nervous and I get really anxious very easily and I'm irrational. Like, if my son would break his leg and I would be in an irrational mess. I'm not a calm person to be around in a tragic, scene. And so even my husband was like, this is very interesting because this is not who I would think you would be in this situation. And I said, well, yeah, me either. It's not me. Like, God is covering me. The Holy Spirit is here. There is absolute, and he is telling, like, my soul, my spirit knows something I don't know. There's no other answer. Like, seriously, because I could have been going to so many what ifs, and not that I never did. Of course, I'm human, but they were dismissed pretty easily because my faith was so strong and I had a knowing. I didn't know what that was. I just I knew it was something. And I knew that God would do something with this. And then I just had to trust in that. I mean, I had the chaplain of the hospital come into me to check on me, and she would come and pray for Carson because that's who actually called me. Your worst nightmare as a
Yeah.
parent. At 9 a.m., I got a call from Sacred Heart Hospital, and it was the chaplain. And that is not the call you want to get. So it was bad, um, as bad as it could be without him being deceased. And then when they tell you, your son may live, but he's not going to be your son anymore, you have to grieve that too
Mhm.
because Carson is an amazing, amazing kid right now. Like, I'm so blessed, but he's not the same person. And he won't be. And that's okay because I truly believe that this is the person God intended him to be. So I'm looking at this from a perspective of excitement and joy. Like, I get to see who God has Carson to become versus,
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of people in the situation, if they don't have that perspective, they're grieving the person that they feel like they lost. And you have to go through that, like, emotionally, because that's just a human being thing. But I was able to move through that pretty fast, and now it's an anticipation of what's to come, and it's just great gratitude and joy. That doesn't mean it's not hard. Again, God brings you the joy and the peace and the gratitude through the hard times, and then it's something you can't get from any other source. It's hard to explain, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people who haven't gone through it. But what I would say is, when the chaplain said to me, I don't know that I could do what you're doing, and she had two boys and one had just become dry, and she's a chaplain. And I said, but it's not me, it's God. And she just looked at me, and it's like, I don't know why God decided to cover me that way. Like, it's humbling to say the least, because yes, I was doing the work, and yes, I was giving. Yes, I was working on my relationship with him. And yes, I was giving it all to him. But I think that deep down, he knew my heart, which was like, I wanted him to take control of this. I asked him to do this in my family, and I was going to have faith through that. I was going to see it through, and it was going to be, and God knows that he's going to get all the glory because it has nothing to do with me. There's not 1 ounce of this could I have done on my own at all. In fact, I tell people, and I feel for people who go through traumatic brain injury because I think it's more challenging than death in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so you have to have faith through something like this. What else can you, I can't even
Yeah.
imagine how else you'd go through it. So with all of that to say, that has been our year. So Carson was in a coma, just so people know the story, in a coma for 6 weeks. So we didn't know what was happening in 6 weeks. He slowly started to wake up, but he was very low level of consciousness. So there was still really no way of knowing what he would do. He would make a few gestures, but he couldn't hold his head up. He couldn't keep his eyes open for very long. He wasn't participating in therapy very much. And so that was a few more weeks, I think like 4 more weeks in a different place out of ICU. Thankfully, he was out of that intensive care, but not really able to do anything else. We found a temporary place for him to go, which was like a long-term care facility while we arranged a flight to Utah for inpatient therapy. They were going to accept him as someone who is in a low level of consciousness, basically not participating in therapy, because they do work with patients like that to kind of help them wake up. But because of God, that 2.5 week period at the long-term care facility, Carson just started to wake up. And it was almost just like in God's timing. He got on the airplane and it was like, he wasn't fully awake, but he was so much more. He was participating in therapy by the day that we got to Utah. So it was just like perfect timing, of course. I was stressing that we weren't there fast enough and this wasn't happening. And it's just like, okay, well, if we would have went 2 weeks earlier, it would have looked very different. So he stayed there for 38 days. We were able to stay with him the entire time, Chris and I. We did not leave, which was such a blessing. And they equipped us to come home. And Carson came home in a wheelchair, but he was talking. He only started to talk about a week before we got home. And so that was such a blessing. He was able to start eating about 2 weeks before we came home. And so he was still in a feeding tube. He was still, doing all of those things until that time. So it took almost 5 months for him to, be able to come home to be able to do
Yeah.
those things. But we prepared our home, we got him home, and then a whole nother series of what I would believe are God connections happen for what has happened to him basically since about May until now, which is almost all of the doors shut for us on all of these outpatient therapies that were very traditional like therapies that we didn't know any better. That's
Yeah.
what we thought we would continue to do. But
Sure.
the doors were shutting and the doors were shutting. And I was getting so frustrated. Like, he can't just sit at home with me. Like, we knew some things to
Yeah.
do and we were carrying on the things we had learned. But like, I was like, we need to get him in other therapies. He needs to keep progressing. And so again, my own control and timing and all of that, and God, had other plans. And through the course of, April, May, and June, and even into July, we were introduced to professionals locally to us that have literally changed Carson's life. I mean, tonight he is going to go with a friend by himself for about an hour or two to another friend's house. And I mean, in a year, when they told us he was not going to leave a long-term care facility. So a lot of it doesn't make scientific sense. And I know that's Jesus. I
Yeah.
also believe that Jesus put people in our lives, not only for Carson, but for us to share with others. So a newfound purpose has really been for us to lead more people to Jesus, because we're all going to have events in our life that God will guide us through them if we have a relationship with him. If we didn't have a relationship with Jesus, I don't know where Carson would be right now. And I truly believe that. And Carson just put out an ebook, which Chris and I helped him write, because he doesn't remember a lot of the events, but wanted to share the story. He hears about the events. He doesn't
Yeah.
remember them personally.
Yeah.
So we wrote the book with Chat GPT's help, because
I
Carson
know.
nor Chris or I are writers. So we're grateful for that. And it's just an ebook of his story, God's testimonies that were woven throughout the whole thing, but also the people that he's brought in our life and the modalities and the natural remedies and just the things that I believe God has already created for us to heal. They are available to us, but people don't know, and it's overwhelming and it's stressful that we wanted to put it all in one place, because we really believe that God is giving this to us so we can share it with other people. And so at his 1 year anniversary, he is at a place where he has willing to be more vulnerable, because it's hard, because he wants to share a story, but looking at those videos is hard for him. And
I
he doesn't
bet.
always want to share it with others, but he
Yeah.
prayed about it. And the fact that my son is praying is the biggest blessing that came out of this entire thing, because he wasn't praying before the accident, and he prays every single night and during the day. And he prayed about, should I do this? And he followed it, and he wrote the book, and he wants to lead people to Jesus. And his full being right now is, God is in control. God's got me. I'm not mad. I'm not shamed about this. I'm not upset. I'm great. He told us yesterday he's grateful for his accident, and for a 21-year-old who can no longer do anything that he used to be able to do, does not sound like himself, is not like his old self, cannot go hang with friends, is not driving, does not have good vision. He has no anger. He has no frustration. He has no resentment. He has no victim mentality. It is unbelievable for us to watch him walk this journey with such grace and just gratitude for God doing something in his life that he believes saved him, not only physically,
Yeah.
but saved him spiritually and saved him from himself and from the enemy. And we've shared a little bit about that, but it is also, he does not recall an encounter, but there is no explanation for the peace he feels and the knowing he has. And so he knows it's Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, people always ask, do you wish this wouldn't have happened? I can't actually say that
Yeah.
because I don't know what would have happened to Carson if this didn't happen. What I do know will happen to Carson now is that he'll go to heaven.
Yeah. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I have
Yeah.
goosebumps. Like I just
Yeah.
goosebumps all
I
over.
mean, like, is there something better than that? Life isn't perfect. This is a temporary life. Yeah, he's 21 and it doesn't feel temporary now, but at the end of the day, this is temporary. And so if he goes to heaven, then no. If this is what it took, then I don't wish it to be different. And I don't think he does either. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And I do believe it's breaking chains in other family members. I do believe it's doing what it's meant to do, and it will continue to do that. And I do believe Carson will bring a lot of people to Jesus. And I mean, there's nothing else in life that you would ever want for your
Yeah.
child.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's so true. There was something I want to go back to, a singular word that you've used a handful of times in our conversation, because I think it's really, really important that we touch on this. You have used the word obey and being obedient to what God was calling you to do. And not just in one instant in your life, but I think it's shown in your life in several different instances. Can you talk to, I think when we talked at the very beginning of this too, you said, if I hadn't been obedient, you can look back in hindsight and see how
Yes.
things would have turned out very, very differently. So can you talk to the obedience part of your journey just a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like we all know when we should do something. Like a thought comes in and it's like, yeah, that would probably be a good idea, but I am not doing that. It sounds way too scary. That's too weird. What will people think?
Oh
I don't
yeah.
have the money. I might lose friends,
Well, the
all of the things.
yes.
And I think that what I'm grateful for is that even when I didn't have Jesus in my life and I didn't understand that obedience, I always was very intuitive, what I would call it. Like if I felt something, it's like, gosh, I should probably act on that. I didn't act on everything. And I did act on things that I shouldn't have acted on too, right? Because there is some discernment and I didn't always have discernment in my life. I made plenty of mistakes when I was not following Jesus. And when I was in a miserable state, I made way more self-sabotaging mistakes. So I have a journey of my own that I had to repent. I had to figure out. And I mean, that's also probably why I had a lot of chaos in my life. I mean, I have to take responsibility for that. God was probably trying to save me from it, but until I allow him to tell me what to do and I obey that, then I'm going to have the chaos. And so, I mean, getting a divorce and deciding that was a move of obedience. I didn't know it at the time. It was the hardest thing that I did. I mean, nobody gets married to get divorced. Nobody wants to be the bad guy that says, I'm breaking up the family. I didn't want my kids to resent me. And I was worried that this was going to be detrimental to them. In hindsight, I think it was able to heal them. And I think being in a dysfunctional relationship is more harming than it is good. But I didn't know what I didn't know. So I don't beat myself up for that anymore because I didn't know. I did the best I could at any given time. And I believe most people do. But I believe you can do better if you have Jesus helping you. And I didn't. So obedient when I didn't realize I was being obedient led me to the right things. But I feel like it's the scary things. It's the things that don't make sense that you really have a strong feeling about, that if you don't do those, like if you're saying no to Jesus, what are you saying yes to and what is the path forward going to look like? And to be honest with you, I had made so many of my own decisions that didn't give me a good path forward, that always created more problems, that I was finally ready to go, if somebody else can do this better,
Yeah.
let's try that. And
Yeah. My
unfortunately,
way
I
is
think a lot
clearly
of,
not working.
yeah. And don't you think a lot of people have to get to that place? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
this is where
Yeah.
God meets us in the lowest point because he's finally like, okay, good. Now you're finally ready to listen to me. I mean, most of us have to go through something to get to
Yeah.
the place where we're willing to let go. But here's the thing about obedience, at least from my perspective, is that once I realized I was obeying and I saw the results of it, and by the way, the results are not always financial freedom. They're not always all the, but they're it's peace. It's like a peace I never had internally. I never was a peaceful person. I was always trying to be busy, do something, fix something, grow something, build something, be successful, because I couldn't slow down to be with myself because I had no peace. I had no joy inside. My spirit was not healthy. And so when I started feeling that, I mean, I didn't care about money, or I didn't care about these other things. I mean, I don't even wear makeup anymore. I don't even care. Like and it's not that I don't care about myself. I love myself. I just don't think about those things like I used to anymore. Now, I like to dress up and get and look nice sometimes. My point is that I stopped shopping all the time. This is a perfect example. I spent all my money. I shopped, I spent money because I was miserable and I was trying to find fleeting moments of happiness, things that brought me joy. I still like shopping. I would still like to go buy things, but I don't have this like urge to do it because I'm not trying to fill something anymore. If I do it, it's because it actually is fun and I do it once in a while and that's great and I need an outfit. It's not because I'm trying to replace something or fill something I'm missing. And so when I obeyed and I got closer to Jesus and I would feel something different and I would start to feel burdens lifted, I would start to feel some peace, I would start to feel some relief from my anxiety, I would start to feel a little bit more just out of chaos. I would feel like I didn't have to be in control of everything. I gave myself more grace. I felt love. I could then heal and I could feel a different way. And that feeling was what the obedience gave me. And then I wanted to obey more. So then the blessings of, sure, maybe a financial thing happens. God will always, He has never, in all of this, even the year where we didn't work, He's always provided. We've been able to pay for Carson's things. And some of them just like, how did that even happen? I don't even know. He provided. And He still grew our business when we weren't working. And the thing is because we will obey Him no matter what, and we will pay this forward. We will give the glory to Him. We will do what He tells us to do. And I believe we've proven it to God, and He knows we will. I mean, we're human and we'll waver and we're going to make mistakes, but I think that we've gotten into this maturity of a relationship with Jesus. And I only am here because of my husband. I don't even know where I would be without that. But that he can, we have the relationship. It's like, God, tell us what to do. In fact, it's not just like, oh, He's telling us what to do and we're realizing it now. Now it's like we're asking Him, like, tell us what to do. We don't even know what to do, but you do. Please make it clear so that we can do what you want us to do with this. And man, I'm just going to tell you, even if you think of nothing but your business, as an entrepreneur for 25 years, the ups and downs, the stresses, the roller coaster ride, the emotions, my business sucks this year, it doesn't, like all of the things, if you just give it to God and you truly know that He's going to show up and you don't have to worry about that, the joy of which and the peace that you can run your business is so different that alone will grow your business because people can sense that. Like God knows that. God's like, just let it go. Give it to me. Trust in me. It's going to work out. We are many times sabotaging our own business because we're trying to figure it out ourselves. So now I don't even worry about that stuff anymore. It doesn't even cross my mind. I do get up and do the work because God's not doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I'm asking Him to put the right people in my life. And I'm asking Him, if somebody asks me to do something and I believe you want me to do it, I'm doing it. Like, even if I know that this might not bring me money, but you're doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
And the result will come. And I trust that. I know that. Therefore, I just can go every day doing what I'm doing without overthinking it, without worrying about it. Is this the right activity? Is it making me money? Am I going to that used to be my life. It's stressful. It's a burnout. It's not fun. And God gave you your talents for a reason. He gave you those things. And so this career of real estate or whatever else you're doing, it's your vehicle. It's not it. It's the vehicle in which God wants you to operate, but He's going to use you in so many different ways. And that is what has brought me so much joy in my business. I mean, I can't imagine ever retiring because I don't have stress in my business really anymore. I mean, truly, today I had somebody tell me that she's going to leave EXP and she's a great friend of mine. I had no emotional reaction to it because I love her. I feel like it's probably the right decision for her now. I will never stand in the way of somebody else's decision. She's had a rough couple of years and I understand where she's coming from. This is not a personal attack on me.
Yeah.
This is not that
Yeah.
she doesn't like me and love me and want to be in business with me. That has nothing to do with all the time we've spent together. This has to do with her life and what she needs to do today. And you know what? This last 2 years, she actually got into a relationship with Jesus and she told me that. And before that, she wasn't. And so if I was supposed to be in her life for that reason alone, then it happened.
Yeah.
And God will do with her what he wants to do with her, and it will or will not be with me. And it is okay because I'm not attached to that. God is going to bring somebody else that's supposed to be in my world probably tomorrow. I mean, like, truly. But the thing is, I've not always been that way. It used to kill me if somebody left. I
Yeah.
would be now distraught for the whole weekend. And that's not what life's about. That's not what this is about. That's not trusting in God's plan for
Yeah.
me or his purpose. And that's the lesson I think that, we can all learn from, like, what can we give over to God a little bit more? How can we just like strengthen that faith muscle?
Cari, I feel like you've just like given a whole sermon and I'm here
Maybe
for
I'm
it.
supposed to
I
give
love
sermons. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it.
I don't
One more
I
topic.
don't know anything but my personal I tell people I feel very, there's imposter syndrome. Everybody has it. I am still not the I am still not the person that can recite Bible verses the way other people can. I have not spent enough time in the word to be able to feel totally equipped. What I have done is I've lived through a lot of things in my life that I have seen very, very clear directive from God. And I
Yeah.
literally watch him show up. And I know that that's what happens. That is just the truth. Now, I have an obligation to continue to learn more, to pass it on to people. And that is actually a major goal of mine in 26. It was a goal in 25, but to be honest with you, I didn't really achieve any of my goals in 25. So 26, I'm going to do that because that is my responsibility. Now that I'm in a place where I have gone through this and people are asking me questions, it's my responsibility to be more equipped to share it. And I know that I'm ready to do that. But I think that if anybody reads my son's ebook, the stories of that, how God showed up, if there's anybody out there, and I've been there, that's kind of like, does that really happen? Does that stuff really, like, I don't really get it. What does that mean when people hear from God? I've been there. It is so clear. The things were so obvious. They were made so obvious. And I really believe it was so that we could tell the story and it would be obvious that even if you don't believe, you're going to read that book and go, like, how could that have really happened if there's nothing else out there, And so that's the coolest part, is that it is so obvious. And so my boldness is only going to become more bold because I lived through something that was so obvious. But I think people can gain faith through other people. And that's the whole point of sharing your testimony, right? That's what God says, like,
Yeah.
storytelling,
Share the
tell your
story.
testimony. People's faith
Yeah.
grows through your experiences. If you don't tell your
Yeah.
testimony, nobody knows.
Exactly.
We all have
Oh my gosh,
testimonies.
yes.
Everybody should be sharing their testimonies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But ours is very, very obvious, which makes it more obvious to me that we're supposed to share it, because even the people who have no faith are going to have a hard time not having a little bit after they read
Oh,
that.
for sure. Yeah, and just we'll all have to make sure to get the link to his book
Yeah.
so we can put that like under our YouTube. When this gets out on YouTube,
Yes.
we'll make sure the links are there so everybody has access to that.
Yeah.
I have one more question I want to ask you. One other thing that you brought up. So you mentioned that one of the biggest things about you being in Idaho was
Yeah.
the prayer warrior group. You had some serious prayer warriors in your life. Talk to that just a little bit because there is so much power in that. And I think it's important that we touch on that.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think about this. I'm like, when I was young and my kids were young and my son was going through his challenges and all the things, if I had people that I could go to and say, can you guys pray for me? And I truly believe that their prayers were being heard by Jesus, it would have changed my entire life. But I didn't know that that was even a thing. I had no clue. When I came to Idaho, I had already been introduced more to, like I said, just reading the Bible and people praying for each other, because we had now started to go to a non-denominational Christian church. And so I was starting to become aware of that. But we opened our co-working space and I met so many Christian women. We actually had a Christian women's event that that somebody had asked me, can we host this at the Cove? And I was like, great. Then I became involved in it. We had a church launch out of our co-working space. The first month we opened it up on Sundays. There was all of these interesting things that were like brought right to us when we started this space, all of which I know now led us to have the prayer warriors that we had, multiple people who showed up at the ICU very clearly directed by the Lord to pray for Carson at specific times, specific things. We would have never had that. We would have never had the power of those people who had a relationship with Jesus speaking life into our son had we not had these opportunities. So Christian ladies nights, we did a Christian business. And so I gained all of these women and some men, these people around us that literally have relationships for years with Jesus, mature in their faith, showing me how to do that. And actually one woman who I'm still friends with, she's done some amazing things and she's doing a retreat. I actually should introduce you to her. She started the women's business networking with me, and she came to the church a few times and we became friends, and we led a women's Bible study together in the evening here at the Cove. And during that, well, she led it and I kind of helped her gather the people, and I went through it with her. And in one of those sessions, I came home just like kind of shook, because in the conversation, it was about being a mother and how being a mom is your first ministry.
Mm.
God gives you children and gives you the children he gives you because you're equipped to minister to them, which is very interesting thinking fast forward to today. However,
Wow.
I needed to hear that because both of my children have struggled with things since early on. And again, I think that's definitely a lot of the enemy kind of came in from all of the chaos in our life in their early years and just generational curses that I've seen that have been perpetuated. And I didn't know about what any of that was. I was just honestly, in all honesty, and this is embarrassing to say, but I say it because I mean, I'm just an open book these days. I would have resentment in moments like, God, why? Why? Like, why do I have two children like this it's so hard and I'm not doing a good job? And like, what did I do? And I would actually feel like I'm being punished potentially. And there was conversations like that. Well, before I talked to God, I would just think that. Then when I started
Yeah.
talking to God, I would be like, what am I supposed to do? Like, and then finally I understood God needs to take care of these things. And there are generational curses and there are these things. But in that moment, and this was like about 3 years ago, maybe, when she said that, I just was like, wait, God chose me for them.
Hmm.
This isn't supposed to be easy. I'm equipped to do this.
That is so
And I
powerful.
came home and told Chris that, and I was in tears. I was just like, what is going on? I was always searching for like, what should I do? What is my ministry? And it's like,
Right
my
there.
children are like, I live this. This has been my whole life. What are you doing, Cari? Like, wake up. And so that is actually the impetus for when I started to realize I could pray here. I could move mountains. God could hear me, and we can change this path. But it wasn't going to be easy, and I needed to really gain and lean into my relationship with Jesus. So that was 3 years ago when I had this epiphany sort of. And then I started to open up, and I had this group of women that I could text, and I'm like, I really need prayers for my son. Like, this is going on. Can you guys just pray? And we would pray for each other and family and different things going on. Then I had another friend who I met through here one morning. I mean, she was praying for me and she called me. She's like, I just want to tell you I was praying because I saw your text and this is what I heard. And I was like, and she's pretty impressive. She's been serving the Lord for many, many years. And she has said things to me that only, the Lord would tell her to say. She doesn't even know me. And she said things that have blown me away. So I had this trust in her. Like, I listen to her, I discern it, but I hear her. One time she showed up at the Cove when I was here right before I was driving to my son's apartment, and I was going there in not a really good situation for my older son. And she said, I don't know why I came here. I felt like I was supposed to come here. I'm not supposed to be here. And then I told her where I was going. And she was praying with me and she told me exactly from the Lord what I was supposed to tell my son. Like, there's been these moments. So there's all these like interesting things. So I have this group of prayer warriors, right? And I mean, these people showed up when Carson was in the hospital. You can't even imagine what happened. Like, thousands of people, by the way, across this country, through social media, through people that I know, literally in their home groups, at their churches, sending us text messages. We were at church today and Carson was brought up. We were in this home group and look at this video. Like, I was just in awe. I didn't even know what was going on. It was just like, how are people praying for? They don't even know who he is. They don't even know who I am. Why are they doing this? It was the most humbling experience I've ever been through. But it was also, I knew that God was hearing it. And so I was
Amen.
very clear that I was supposed to share this whole story and tell people, because that's what God wanted me to do. Because also people were seeing that it was working and it was growing their faith and they were continuing to pray. And it was like rounding up these Christians that were like believing in prayer and doing it together. And my husband had past clients. A past client called him up. Well, this is what's crazy. It's in the book. My husband drove every morning at 6 a.m. to be there before the night nurse left, before the new one came in. We would leave at night because he was in a coma. They would tell us, go get sleep. But we were there as much as we could be. But he would go in the morning and then I would come by about 10 o'clock and then I would stay late and he'd meet me there. And we had this routine. He was driving in the morning and he called me and he said, Cari, I had Daryl, which was one of his past clients, who was also a pastor for many years. I just had him pop into my head. So I think I'm going to give him a call today. And I was like, yeah, you should. He's like, I don't know why he popped in my head kind of randomly, but I think there's probably a reason. I said, yeah, absolutely. Before Chris got to the hospital, Daryl texted him and said, hey, Chris, I was up praying for your stepson this morning. God said, I need to come pray over him today. I'm going to get very emotional. He said, when he came, he said, Carson, you need to go to Jesus. You need to go to him right now. And this was like day 4 in the coma. We didn't know if he was going to live. And I knew, like, whether he lived or not, like, Daryl needed to be there to tell Carson to go because he was not going. And so whether he died or lived, he needed to meet Jesus. Like, I would be at peace with either of those. And I know in my being, like, that's when Carson had an encounter. Like, he finally got permission to go because Carson didn't feel worthy. And he didn't. And he was struggling. He didn't have that ability to, like, why would God want me to come to him? I've not been living a good life. I've not been obeying. I've not been, I've been making mistakes. I'm screwing up. I'm rebelling. Like, why would I go to Jesus? Like, I deserve this, And he was clear. He said, I have a very clear message for Carson this morning. And he just said, it's going to be fine. He's going to go to Jesus. I know he will. And whatever happens, whatever Jesus' plan is, he's met his father. And there is no way Carson goes through this like he's gone through with the peace and the unless he met Jesus. So, these are the moments where I'm grateful for Daryl's obedience, right? Like, what if he wouldn't have listened to that?
Right.
What if he wouldn't have called Chris and said, I'm going to come pray for Carson? I mean, this is what God does. He uses people. And if you aren't obedient to something, like, what if you missed something for somebody else?
Yeah.
What if God's trying to use you to help somebody else and you aren't obedient to that? Like, that's what I think of now. Like, I don't even care how crazy I look. What if this is my moment to, like, be the voice of God on earth to somebody who needs to hear it? And my friend Michelle, who brought me, to the Bible study and all these amazing things happen. We're in Utah and I had a really rough morning and I didn't cry a whole lot during this time. I mean, honestly, it's crazy. I really didn't. I mean, I'd have a few little moments, but I was, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to do the thing. And I wasn't even really sad anymore about it in Utah, but I just had like a morning and I was having a hard time getting out of the hotel room. And I don't know what it was. I was kind of crying and I was just like, what is going on? And I was walking over to the hospital and Chris was already there. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just a little bit off today. And I get in there and I get an audio text message from Michelle, my friend, who I hadn't heard from since ICU, which was probably about 3 months earlier. I mean, I knew she had been praying. I just wasn't really talking to a lot of people. It was pretty chaotic. And her whole entire audio message to me was like, hey, Cari, I was praying for you guys this morning in my prayers. And I just felt like I was supposed to message you this because this is what I saw. And it was just this most beautiful message of like, you know what? God's there. Don't question it. Like, it's all good. Like, there's angels. Like, I see angels, like, literally hovering over your son. Like, he's healing. It's all good. Like, there's nothing you need to worry about. And in fact, I think that you're going to have something that you're going to see. God's going to show you something today. So just like, look for it. I love you, whatever. This is a beautiful message. I'm playing it out loud and Chris is looking at me and I'm just bawling because I'm like, I couldn't even get out of the room
Yeah.
today. How did she
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And, but again, her obedience, because God knew I was really struggling. I needed something. Like I just needed something because I was just off and the enemy was attacking me and telling me bad things were going to happen and whatever. My son was still not talking, and that afternoon was when he actually said his first word. Hi, mom. Literally, he said it. They got him to actually be able to verbalize a word on his stomach, and it was hi, mom. And it was that afternoon. Like, these are the stories. I'm telling you how obvious. Like, if somebody reads this book, they're like, either she's making all of this up, which I promise you I'm not, because you can go to the source, or you're like, okay, somebody has a work here. Somebody's
Yeah.
doing something. But
Yeah.
these are also what I'm trying to tell people is like, yes, we need to obey for our, because it could be something great in our own life, but think about the obedience these people, like what they did and what it did for us.
Yeah.
Because your obedience isn't always just about you and your life. It's about you
Yes.
being a messenger for God, because
Yeah.
this is how he works through people.
Yeah. It's an assignment. You have an assignment.
Yeah, and like, okay, like thank praise God that they did. And
Yeah.
and that he brought them into my life and I was open to that relationship, and that, he positions people around you. Like that's the thing also, like you hear all these sayings, who you surround yourself with matters, like all these things, like I can't tell you what would my life be like this year or last year or now if who I didn't surround myself with mattered, but it wasn't who I surrounded myself with. It's what God surrounded me with.
Mhm.
And God will position those people. But the question is, do you allow that? Are you okay to move away from old friends and into new relationships? Are you okay to open yourself up to those new things? If you're not, then God can't position those people. Well, he can position them around you, but you aren't going to reap the benefits. He's trying to help you, but what are you,
Yeah.
or do you feel like you could be somebody around somebody else? And, I see people say all the time, like, oh, I feel like I could help that person. I want to be in business with them, but I don't want to be pushy. I get it. And yet, if you really feel like you're supposed to, I think that you have a responsibility to try a little harder because there might be a reason for that.
Yeah. I know I think that it becomes a little cliche because we hear it so often. Yet, and I think too, just that humans are so used to living their life by default, right? And they're not intentional with it, that they hear it and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other, but they don't actually implement it intentionally, strategically, right? Like, or pay attention to, what God is showing them about those relationships or whatever. So,
Yes.
oh, so powerful, Cari. I know at the beginning of this, before we even hit record, we were like, there's no way this is going to be one episode. There is
No,
no way. So I don't even know how to wrap this up at this
I
point
know.
because it's
Hey,
just,
stay tuned until next time.
stay
There's
tuned.
so
Yeah.
much I could
We
share.
have
It's
a round
amazing.
two.
Yes, I would love it. I would love a round two. I would love to, be a resource for anybody that, is going through a tough time, or if anybody out there has had a traumatic brain injury. There's been more people that have reached out to us that have suffered something like that we had no idea. It's kind of a silent situation. Once you quote unquote recover, it's not something that you can see on the outside, and people are oftentimes embarrassed about it, or they've been told there's nothing more they can do, so they just try to deal with it. But I don't believe that. I believe that there are a lot of things that people can do. I believe that God can heal you in ways that you just don't know. I firmly believe that, and I believe God designed our brain to reheal. And in fact, there's a lot of scientific evidence that's now pointing to the biblical principles and to actual scripture. And I'm geeking out on that stuff because I've always been a mindset coach. So now I'm like, my mind's being blown. That would be a cool second episode. But also, there is hope. You know what I mean? There is hope. Doesn't matter what you're going through, there's hope. And honestly, if you're in a really big test, it's probably because there's a really cool testimony. But if you don't see that, then it might not come to fruition because you're not allowing the testimony to come from the test. And so sometimes you just need to be able to, talk to somebody through that. But the ebook is full of hope. It's full of inspiration. I'm proud of him for sharing his story. It's really to give glory to God. That's the main thing. And to share what we've learned to somebody. And even if it's not a TBI, even if it's a health issue, if it's an autoimmune, a neurological problem, trauma, mental health, there's a lot of synergy for what we have learned to heal Carson with all of those things. So I think this spans the gamut, and I think it could help a lot of people. And so I'm always here, for that. Usually it's like, hey, call me about real estate needs. You can do that too. And I'll help you with your real estate business because I'm
Absolutely.
really good
Yes.
at that.
In
But
Idaho,
there's,
call
yeah,
Cari.
yes, yes, yeah. And, I love helping people with their real estate business. I still do that every single day.
Well,
It's
see,
what
that's a
God made
third
me.
episode, Cari. We're going to have you on to talk about business.
We will do that. By the way, all of these things though, there's business wrapped into all of this, and the lessons span all of those things for sure. But I'm really grateful for you allowing me to tell the story. There's only been a few times that I've been able to do it because usually I end up crying like I do, but eventually I'll get over that. Mostly it's just because it's still fresh and raw, but
It's raw.
more than anything, it's a blessing. It's not sadness. It's just like, I'm still in awe.
I heard this the other day, though. I'm trying to remember where I saw this. It was just a day or two ago. I read somebody was writing something about how emotions are actually a gift from God. Because if you're
Mm,
emotionless, think
mhm.
about how, then you also wouldn't have joy. You wouldn't
Yeah,
have happiness. You wouldn't have any of the good emotions either. So if you're
right.
emotionless, that's actually really
True.
sad, right? Like
Yeah,
having emotions is a blessing.
I
So
agree.
I
Yeah,
never thought about it that way before.
yeah, it's good. I like it. Yeah, I think I'll cry forever about this, not because I'm sad, but because I can't believe how
Yeah.
much grace God has
Oh
bestowed
my
upon my
gosh. Yes.
family. I'm humbled. I absolutely don't deserve it. No one does. No one could earn it. I didn't. But what I did do is I believed, and I think that's all it takes. Is it takes a true belief in Jesus. I believed he could do anything. That I believe he does miracles. I believed it when my son was in the hospital. I didn't doubt it. I didn't know if he'd do it for me. I didn't know if that's the path he had for us. But I knew he could do it if that was the path. And I think that God just wants us to still realize he can do it. And if we believe it, watch what he'll do in your life. And no miracle is too small or too big. They're all miracles. They're just different. And he can do a miracle in your life if you really believe it too. And also sometimes it's not the way we envision it to be,
Hmm.
but we're not the ones in control. And I think it'll be far better than I could have envisioned it at the end of the day. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. You guys make sure to check out the links we put below our YouTube page. Reach out to Cari for sure. Cari, we'll have you back for sure
Yeah,
for another
absolutely. I'm
episode.
excited. Thank you
Yeah.
again for having me on.
Thank you so much, Cari. I'll see you soon.